Succulents planted in the garden will have slightly different watering needs than potted ones. But it's not that different, and because these plants are for the most part just so hardy, it's also pretty easy. And if you plant the right cultivars, they will often look after themselves. Though as always, there are factors that will influence the watering requirements. I'll break them down and hopefully cover most scenarios. In the last 7 months, I watered my in-ground succulents about 5 times. Although we were initially expecting a hot and dry summer, the rain has been consistent enough and we only got a few days of over 40 degrees Celsius or 104 Fahrenheit. After a few hot days, there was usually a storm or a couple of days rain. We had enough rain to soak the ground at least every 2 weeks. To compare, in 2019 we were in the worst drought on record, and back then I'd water a couple of times a week. Smaller plants such as sedum would get water every other day. You can also tell whether a succulent is thirsty by looking at its leaves. If they are getting wrinkly, they need water. In winter, I'd water if the succulents look like they need it. Many are dormant in the cooler months and do not really require water at all. Having said that, it can get pretty warm in winter, and if the soil is very dry and there's no rain, I'd water every 2 to 3 weeks. Much will depend on your local weather, and I'd suggest to go by what your succulents look like when determining if they need to be watered. Nice big and chunky succulents will not need as much water as the smaller ones with thin leaves. Same goes for mature versus young succulents, and established versus freshly planted. Basically, bigger, thicker plants that have roots grown well into the garden can almost survive without any input from you. From my experience, succulents like that only need to be watered during droughts. But smaller, thinner-leafed succulents or young plants with small root systems will need a bit more when the weather gets warm. Succulents will grow in full sun, part shade, and some cultivars will even prefer to be fully in shade. The more sun exposure they have, the faster they'll dry out. Personally, I prefer to plant sun-loving succulent cultivars in the sunniest parts of the garden, as we can have some wet years. They get almost all day sun. I do have to water them quite often during droughts, but in my opinion it's better this way, as I have a bit of control over how wet they get. Although many will grow in shade gardens, the risk of fungal disease and water-related disease is higher. On the plus side, you won't have to water frequently, even in droughts. If your climate is prone to regular dry weather, planting in a shadier spot might not be a bad thing. When it comes to succulents, bigger the slope, the better. Succulents' roots can easily rot if they sit in stagnant water or soggy soil for too long, and it can kill the whole plant. Sloped gardens may need a bit more watering when dry, but it's much better than risking rot. If your garden is flat, you may want to consider raising it a bit with the use of edging or stones. This could save your succulents from drowning. Before we wrap things up, I'd just quickly like to warn you about hydrophobic soil. Even though it's better for succulents to be planted in a sunny spot on a slope and not get overwatered, it is beneficial to not let the soil dry out too much. When soil and potting mix get too dry, they can get hydrophobic and repel water. This is mainly a problem in places with low and irregular rainfall. On the surface, hydrophobic soil may seem like it is wet after watering, but when you dig just a bit deeper, the soil will be bone dry. This can kill smaller succulents that don't have a lot of water stored in their stems and leaves, as hydrophobic soil just won't absorb water, not allowing the plants to have a drink. It, however, doesn't mean you have to water all the time, and people in climates with regular rain are unlikely to experience this. It's just good to be aware that it's a possibility if there is a drought and the weather is warm. Hydrophobic soil can be fixed by working through well-rotted compost, adding mulch and soaking with a soaker hose. Heavy and lasting rain will usually also sort it out. And with that, I think it's time to end. I hope this video was useful, and if you have anything to add or would like to ask a question, you can do so in the comments below. To learn more about succulents, hit the subscribe button or go to our website succulentgrowingtips.com. Thank you so very much for watching.